We read in this week's parsha, a portion of Chukas. Medaber Hashem Moshe v'Aaron Lemor. Hashem spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, saying, Zos Chukas HaTorah Asher Tziva Hashem Lemor. This is the statute of the Torah, which Hashem commanded, saying, we know the Torah itself is divided into three classifications of mitzvos. We have mishpatim, these are laws. Then we have edus, testaments. And then we have chukim, which are statutes. That one is not permitted to steal. That itself is a mishpat. I mean, it's a rational law. We understand that they're laws which pertain to ownership, and therefore taking something which is not rightfully yours, it's in violation of the law. Damaging another's property, injuring a person, it's understood. Each person in his own right has certain property rights, ownership rights, individual rights. You have no right to infringe on someone else's existence. These are rational laws. Edus, testaments. Shabbos is a testament. God created the world. Matzah, these are testaments. God took us out of Egypt. L'man yedu dorasechem. Keep sukkos hashaftis b'nei Yisrael. We commemorate, we sit in the sukkah, that God had us, whether it's commemorating the clouds of glory in the desert, or we were in booths in the desert. And chukim, dietary laws. Not permitted to wear a combination of wool and linen. These are statutes. It's something which are not rational laws. But factually, all laws are really chukim. Meaning that what do we do mitzvos? We have positive, we have negative commandments. There's no Rashi HaKodesh in one location explains that due to the Chet Egel, or due to the sin of Adam, eating of the Eitz Hadas, it brought a certain degree of illness, spiritual illness, into existence. It impacted negatively on our souls. The Eitz Hadas, it's tov v'ra, it's the ra, it's evil. Evil was introduced into the essence of the human being. How do you rebuild yourself from that evil? By not transgressing the negative, which is passive. By not, the soul rehabilitates itself. By not indulging in the 365 negative commandments, any one of them, the soul naturally has a recovery period. So that's recovery. And what does mitzvah say? He refers to, that's illumination. You illuminate the neshama. That's the or. It's meir. Meir. The mitzvah says enlightens. So we say ner mitzvah Torah or. What is the ultimate illuminator? So we understand open illuminator is because it gives us understanding. It elucidates many questions. It gives us a sense of many things. The Torah, ner mitzvah Torah or. But according to the Rashi HaKodesh, which is not over here on location, it illuminates the neshama. The soul radiates as a result of the Torah itself, because that's the ultimate illuminator. Torah or, the Torah, because it's a mitzvah saseh, and if Talmud Torah keneged kulam, if Torah itself is the equivalent of all the mitzvahs combined, so one mitzvah is an illuminator, so this is the equivalent of all positive commandments. So definitely, it's the ultimate illuminator. So the neshama radiates as a result of Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the Kabbalah Torah, received the Torah at Sinai. He was the conduit for Klal Yisrael. It's his Koran Orponov. No one engaged and assumed a level of understanding of Torah as Moshe Rabbeinu. He radiated. So you see what radiated. His body didn't radiate. It was his soul was radiating. This was a semblance of Adam Rishon. Adam Rishon before the Chet, he radiated. What's the radiation? What is the radiance? What does that indicate? That's the Kedusha. It's the holiness of what? Of the Neshama. So what infuses the Neshama with holiness, the ultimate level of holiness? The Torah itself. But what is the Torah? The Torah itself is Chochmas Hashem. That's God's wisdom. We always mention the Zohar, Yisro v'Oraisa v'Kudsha Brichu Chatu. The Jewish people, Oraisa, the illuminator, which is Torah in Aramaic, and God are all one. We're all intermeshed, intertwined. God is the ultimate illuminator. God is the essence of everything. Now, what is our connection? How do we cleave to God? It's through the Torah. How we dovek? How do we attach ourselves? Through the Torah. It's the Oraisa. That is the illuminator. Zos Chukas Torah. This is, so when we speak about the Torah itself, if the mitzvah and this everything, all the laws, the objective is to infuse the neshama with kedusha. So that we understand something on a rational level, you should not infringe on somebody else's rights. How does that somehow impact on our neshamas, on our souls? That's a rational understanding. Even if God wouldn't have communicated, we would have come upon it ourselves. Because they're rational laws. There's a certain degree of beholdenness. Parent brings you into existence, you're beholden to your parent. Is that the essence, or that's the way we process it? Whenever the Torah speaks about, delineates the various classifications of mitzvahs, always begins chukim mishpatim. Chukim, statutes always precede mishpatim. Because in its essence, the mishpat is a chuk. That we process it as a mishpat, because as a human being we're able to see its value. But in its essence, what did God give it to us? We have no idea. It's similar to the chinuch, who's a codifier. He offers tamei mitzvos. He tries to cull the lessons we can learn from the Torah mitzvos. This is what he's coming up with. From Chazal, from Midrash, whatever it may be. The Torah doesn't in any way reveal this. But it's for us. When we come upon something, there's a concept known as Musa Haskel. You have an experience in life, you draw certain lessons. The mitzvahs, you're not permitted to kill a mother, slaughter a mother and its calf and its offspring on the same day. So the chinuch says, why? Because it's an expression of cruelty. Because as a human being, how do you kill a mother and its child on the same day? It's cruelty. Does the Torah say that's why you're not supposed to? No. But as a human being, that we have emotions and we have feelings, that's what we should actually cull from that. But that's not the essence. That's not the actual reason. But it's a lesson we could draw from that. That certain, in addition, we have certain additional benefits that to enhance our senses of human being, what a human being should be, and be proper, and to be Rachmanim, which is really the characteristic of the Jew, to be a Rachman. It's interesting. We speak about God's attributes. Midas Rachmim, the attribute of Rachmim, mercy, Chesed, judgment. It's not the essence of God. We don't know what the essence of God is. It's the only way He relates to existence. For existence, these attributes are necessary. Otherwise, existence couldn't exist. But what is His essence? We have no idea what His essence is. So I'm saying that the Jew has midas harachmanus. We have the innate characteristics of being merciful, which we actually inherited from Avram Avinu. Jews are Rachmanim by Shonim Gomnei Chasodim. We are merciful, we have shame, we have conscience, and we do acts of chesed. Those innate characteristics allow us to do many other things. These are human characteristics. They're human attributes. But those human attributes are necessary to facilitate something which goes beyond the human, to facilitate mitzvos. It's the same thing. The mitzvos that God gave us, the example I gave us, you should not slaughter the mother and its calf on the same day and its offspring on the same day. We draw from that, you should not be cruel, because that itself is a demonstration of cruelty as a human being. But who senses that cruelty? If a person has compassion, he senses it's cruel. A person who's insensitive, it's irrelevant. You kill what you have to kill. So again, because that innate characteristic of being Rachmanim is very basic for us to develop our spirituality in other areas. For instance, why do you give charity to the poor? Pesoach tiftach. There's a positive commandment. A man is poor, you have a sense of feeling towards the person. Is that why you have to give charity? That only facilitates the mitzvah. But that's not why, because you should have rachmanis, you should have mercy on him. If a person is in need, you're supposed to help him. Pesoach tiftach es yodcha. Lo sikbots, you should not withhold your hand. All these things. So in essence, everything's always chukim mishpatim. The mishpatim, the laws, are always predicated on chukim because in essence, everything's a chuk. The mishpat is only the way we process it in terms of what we cull from the mitzvah itself. Zos chukas ha-Torah. This is the statute of the Torah. So Rashi himself cites Chazal. V'shasodn v'umas ha'olam monin es Yisrael. Because Satan, Satan, and the nation of the world, they grieve the Jewish people. Loma mitzvah zos. What is this mitzvah all about? Umatam yesh bo. Firstly, it's irrational. Secondly, as they say, it doesn't make any sense. So the Sifsei Chachomim points out over here, firstly, how do you fathom it? Secondly, it's contradictory. So matam yesh bo means, how's it possible that it has a contradictory effect? It contaminates the pure and purifies the contaminated. Firstly, ma mitzvahs. What is this mitzvah? Secondly, matam yesh bo. What's the rationale? Because it's contradictory. Lefichach kosev b'chuka. So what does God write? Chuki milefonai. Gzeiri milefonai. It's my decree. Ein lecho reshus lahare achreo. You have no right to question it. They grieve us. They grieve us. What's the problem if they grieve us? Now, very years ago, somebody once asked me, he says, Rabbi, you know, in the secular, I have the best education, I have experience, I could respond to any question they put to me. But yet, in Judaism, because I'm just a beginner and my knowledge is paltry, I feel almost foolish. When people ask me questions, I can't respond. If a person feels inadequate, he can't respond. Actually, what happens? He says, you know, this is not for me. He distances himself. Nobody wants to be compromised in his presence, in his essence. I'm supposed to be accomplished, and here I see like I'm not accomplished. I'm inadequate. So if you're aggrieved, then you can't answer the question. What does it create? First, it creates, it's a compromise on your being, on who are you, what do you represent. You're following blindly. It has a reason you don't. Evidently, seemingly, it is really baseless. You know what the answer is? Chukim milefonai. It's something you're not meant to understand. Meaning, something that you're meant to understand and you don't understand, then it's an issue. Why don't you understand? But if you never meant to understand it, it's not a reflection of you, your lack of knowledge. You're not meant to understand it. The Gemara tells us that before a person comes into existence, one of the pronouncements on the droplet of semen before conception is Chochem or Tipesh, wise or foolish, wealthy or poor. man is the equivalent of Bill Gates. Another person, unfortunately, his destiny is to be poor. That's his destiny. Because he's poor, should he feel inadequate? Why should he feel inadequate? You're wealthy because you had a pronouncement of wealth. It's not a reflection on my inadequacy. I do my best. But as best as you do, all you have, the end result is what God wants you to have. So therefore, it's not a reflection on me. You agree with me. It's contradictory. It's irrational. It's foolishness. It's nonsense because we can't understand it. You're not supposed to understand it. It's a decree. It's my decree. You're not supposed to understand it. So not understanding is not a reflection of your inadequacy. That you're lacking. But that's the answer. Chukim l'fanai. You know, the Torah goes out its way to say, speaks about our number is the smallest number. The Jewish people are the smallest nation in the world. Smallest. So, how does it look? I mean, you have nations. India, Chinese. We're talking about the numbers are not fathomable numbers. Other numbers. Jewish people we're talking about, it's a pittance. It's minuscule compared to the others. Is that a reflection of who we are? A person says, something, we need more people. Years ago, there was a person who says, we have to be more lax on conversion, so like this we could actually increase our numbers. Is it numbers? Person has endless amount of pennies. Person has a few million, thousand flawless diamonds, carat diamonds. It says quantitative versus this, but what is its worth? What's the innate worth? Again, what's worth? Worth is the innateness of something. We're not talking about quantitative, we're talking qualitative. If kol hamatzal nefesh achas mi Yisrael is ki lehitzilo lamolei, saving one Jew is the equivalent of saving the world. So what is a Jew? The gross natural product of a certain whatever may be endless. It's irrelevant what it is. But what is the essence of the person? One Jew is more than the whole world. So if you have multiple Jews, it's multiples of the world. Therefore, when you save the Jew, you're saving, it's equivalent to saving all existence. But how do you understand that? How do you understand, how could one person be the equivalent of all existence? Chukip hilefanai. Why are you royalty and he's not royalty? That's just the reality of who we are. Why is the prince and the commoner is the commoner? Because he's the son of the king. That's the reason. If you're the son of the king, you're a different dimension of person. So if God says, B'ni b'chori Yisrael, the Jewish people are my firstborn, and Moshe Rabbeinu says the name of Hashem, Bodem atem l'Hashem Elokechem, you're God's children. So if you're a king's child, you're a prince. So if God says, I value as my children, what are you? It's beyond princes. Beyond that. Chukihi. Gzeiri l'fonai. You're not meant to understand it. I'd once mentioned first Rashi at the beginning of Rashis, he cites the Midrash Rabbi Yitzchok. Rabbi Yitzchok asks, the morale is to give you an appreciation, explains why is the Torah referred to as Torah? Torah tzivah lanu Moshe. He says the word Torah comes from the word lahoros. It's to give direction. What is Torah? It's a book of law. It tells the Jew how he has to live his life. It's a prescription of life. Every aspect of life is dictated by the Torah. So why does the Torah begin with the history of existence, creation? And all the nations that existed were destroyed till finally we come Chodesh Zelochem, Rosh Chodoshim, right? The mitzvah of sanctifying new moon, which is the first mitzvah that was given to us as Klal Yisrael. And that's his question. The Torah should begin with HaChodesh Zeh Lochem. So he cites a verse from Tehillim, because it's important to know that God is the creator of the world, and it's God's to give and God's to take. And he destroyed the nations who did not live according to his standard, and he took from them and he gave to us. Canaan. So if anybody should accuse you of being conquerors, marauders, or people who displace innocent people, we say God gives and God takes. God gave it to us. The land of Canaan was given to us as our inheritance. That's why the Torah begins with the history of existence, creation. The great flood, the dispersion, the Tower of Babel, all this. Reward and punishment. So the obvious question is, go tell that to the atheist. Go tell that to the communist. Go tell it to the Chinese. Go tell it to the Arab. The reason why we have a right, because it says in our Torah. They said, well, we don't accept that. So if they don't accept it, the world doesn't accept it. So they're still calling us thieves and conquerors. So what's the answer? The answer is not for the world. The answer is for us. They may aggrieve us. It's all nonsense. So if we hear nonsense and we're not able to process it, it's a reflection on us. God says, you're not supposed to understand it. That it's yours is because I've gifted it. And you have to know I've gifted it. But why do you gift it? Because I created the world. And it's mine to give and to take as I've given and taken in the past. So everything is for us to know. It's irrelevant what the world understands or wants to understand. And whatever way they want to criticize us or belittle us or demonize us, it's all irrelevant. All that matters is the way Hashem sees us. If you're seen positively in God's eyes, then you're in a good place. If not, chas v'sholom, it's irrelevant to how the world sees you. They may see you as exemplary, but if you're not exemplary in God's eyes, then we have a problem. The Gemara in Bava Basra tells us there was a king. He was from the Herodian dynasty. He was a great tzaddik. He was a Jew. His name was Munvaz HaMelech. Munvaz. And what he did was, all the wealth for generations that was stored away by the family, he went and he distributed all to charity. So they were upset. Here, the family, it's like the queen's jewels, the king's jewels. We've been storing this. This is the heirloom of the dynasty, of royalty, and you give it all away to charity. He says, so he responded, he says, they stored for others. I'm storing it away for myself. They stored it below, I'm storing it above. That's what he said. They missed the boat. They were totally absorbed with themselves. They gave it away to others. What about yourself? They kept it on the terrestrial level. All of its value was only material. I've given it a spiritual value by giving it away to tzedakah, to charity. It's a whole different, but they were upset. It's irrelevant. Do you understand what I said? Fine. If you don't understand it, it's irrelevant. He understood what it was. There's a midrash. They should take to you the paraduma. So there's a personalization between the red heifer, which is the ultimate statute, and Moshe. So the Midrash Tanchuma explains, Rabbi Yossi Bechanin Omar LaKodesh Baruch Hu LaMoshe, Ani Megal Lecha Tampora. To you I will reveal the understanding, the inner workings, and the rationale of the red heifer. Aval Acherim Chuka. But for others, it's Chuka, statute. Shlomo Melech, although he was the Chochem Mikol Adam, he was the wisest man who ever lived, he says in Koheles Rechoka, it's beyond me. He wasn't able to fathom it. He fathomed, he was able to come upon all statutes through his unlimited wisdom. His wisdom was the equivalent of the wisdom of the whole Klal Yisrael. But Torah Aduma he wasn't able to come upon. The Chukah, the statute of Torah Aduma. Why not? Why wasn't he able to? Is it only because it's Metaris at Torim and Metamias at Tameim? Because this contradictory factor? Because it's interesting. The Medrash tells us that there are 4 situations which the world aggrieves us, which they criticize, that we behave, act, and conduct ourselves in an irrational context. What are they? Rabbi Shua the Sichlim Shem Reb Levi Omer Arba Dvorim Yitzhara Meishav Aleim. There are 4 areas which the evil inclination responds to us, and the answer is, meaning it grieves us, responds to us, criticizes us, and the answer is Chukah. It's written Chukah. Ve'elohein Eshesach, the wife of a brother, which is an incestuous relationship. Kelayim, you're not permitted to wear a combination of wool or linen, or crossbreed 2 species of animals, or crops. Sarmesh Taleach, the goat that's sent down on Yom Kippur, the mountainside, to atone for the Jewish people. Upar Aduma. And the red heifer. Eshesach, what's Eshesach? The Chsiv, the Torah tells us, Eshes, Ervas, Eshach Chichlo Sagale. You're not permitted to engage sexually with the wife of your brother. It's an incestuous relationship. If God forbid a person does, besides having liability of spiritual excision kares, the child is illegitimate, the child's a mamzer. What happens mes below bonim? What happens if the brother dies childless? Yivoma yovo leo. There's a positive commandment. He should perform levirate marriage. Uchsiv ba'arayos, and it says in regard to all these forbidden sexual relations, the incestuous relationships, ushmartem es chukosai ves mishpatai. You should observe my statutes. So the Torah concludes, this is a statute. What does that tell me it's a statute? As we're explaining, because you have this inner contradiction. Because what is the question? If in fact it carries the liability of kares, which is you being cut off from God, and if it produces illegitimacy, which is the child is lo yova mamzeb kal Hashem, the child is spiritually impaired, that he cannot marry to Jewish people, evidently this relationship is spiritual lethal. It's a lethal relationship. So how could you take something which is innately spiritual, lethal, compromising, and detrimental, eternally detrimental to the person, and all of a sudden, in other contexts, not only is it permitted, it's a mitzvah. Totally. It's how do you process that? The answer is chukah. You cannot process it. The Navi says that the world to come, what is it? So Chazal tell us, whatever the way they describe it, but that's all described in the physical. That we say that a koras ruach in Pirkei Avos, just what we call a whiff, just having a whiff of the world to come is more than all the pleasure. This existence, from the beginning till the end, encapsulated in one moment. Physical pleasure. The world to come, it's a different dimension of whatever that means. And the Navi says, it arrives there as physical beings, we don't even know what that is. We process reward, punishment, pain. It's a different dimension, a different realm of that reality. We have no idea what it is. We're only of whatever that may be. It's Ayin Lo Rosa. Chuki. It's beyond your comprehension. It's something you cannot process. As you cannot relate to what the world to come is. Because we live within a physical context. The dimension of understanding you have to understand this is beyond. It's like the Mishnah tells us, there's certain things a Jew is not even permitted to go there. Now when we speak about speculation, you speculate. What is speculation? That whatever it may be has relevance to something that there exists a frame of reference. The question is, what is it? Do you compare it to this or to something else? What about it's something which there's no frame of reference? Whatever it is, there's no frame of reference since creation. What existed before creation? Before the ex nihilo, what existed? It was nothing to something. What existed? Even vacuum is creation. Nothingness is creation. That's all part of. It's not fathomable. You can't fathom it. So there's no frame of reference. Even so you can't even talk about speculation. Whatever you can say is definitely incorrect. Feel it because it's beyond human beings' ability to fathom what it is. Even you see, if the Medrash says that Hashem revealed the understanding Paraduma to Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not like Olam Haba. It's not something which is fathomable. Which means it's beyond the capacity of a human being. But it is within human intellect. If it's spiritualized sufficiently, you're able to grasp it. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to grasp it. Kilayim, Tichsiv lo sil b'shatnes. You're not permitted to wear a combination of wool and linen. But sin b'tzitzis mutter. But what about if you have tzitzis, wool tzitzis on a four-cornered linen garment? It's permitted. It's a mitzvah. Uchsibba, chuka. And it says it's a statute. What's the Torah addressing? What's the answer? You're not supposed to understand it. As I said, therefore, it's not a reflection on your inadequacy. That you're inadequate, therefore you can't understand it. God says you're not supposed to understand it. Sar mishtaleach, dichsiv, hamishaleach is a sar la'azoz lichabis begodov. The man who's designated to take the goat out into the desert, he becomes contaminated, that even his clothing is contaminated, because it carries the sins, the impurity of the Jewish people on it. Yet it brings about the ultimate atonement. It brings about Lifnei Hashem Titoru. The crimson cloth that was in the entrance to the sanctuary, miraculously turns white. It was crimson, turns white. So something which contaminates the carrier brings about the ultimate level of atonement. What's the answer? Statute. You're not meant to understand it. We find that there's certain types of sin offerings. You can either bring, it's called an adjustable sin offering. If you're wealthy, you bring an animal. If you're less wealthy, you're poor, you bring a bird. Or you can even bring a meal offering. The Torah says that when you bring an animal, the Torah says, Reach nichoach l'Hashem. It's a fragrance to Hashem. Reach nichoach. The reach, the fragrance is nichoach. It's pleasurable to God. Broiled meat, it has a certain desirable fragrance. Pleasurable smell. What happens when you take a bird and you burn it with its feathers? Stench. Hashem. God's. So the draws from this. As much as little as you do, as long as the intent is right, you do your best. A person cannot do more than his best. But you're a poor man. I'm still doing my best. I'm no less than the rich man. No less, maybe even greater. Because the sacrifice of the poor man is greater than the sacrifice of the rich man. That's what it is. So it's not a reflection of inadequacy. I accept it. I accept, and Hashem says it is the same. It's no less than that. If you do your best. So that's why chukah is the answer. But you're supposed to understand it. I'm not supposed to understand it. Paraduma, again, whoever's involved in the process of the red heifer from the beginning to end, they all are contaminated, even their clothing are contaminated. The gufa mitaris begodim. If you have a garment becomes contaminated with the dead, you sprinkle the water mixed with ash on it. It purifies it. Sibba chuka, zos chukas Torah. This is the ultimate statute. Over here, it says the Orach Chaim HaKodesh asks. The Torah should say zos chukas haTorah haTairo. This is the statute of purification. What is it referred to as zos chukas haTorah? So evidently, this statute has something with Torah. So one of the interpretations he offers, he says, derech remez, on an illusory level, yirtzeh be'omer zos chukas haTorah, shim yikaimo mitzvah zu, that if you fill this mitzvah properly, although you don't understand it, hagam yosech chuka belotam, ma'ala leim hakosef kilukima Torah ashetziv Hashem leimor. If you fulfill a mitzvah, a human being says, I have to understand. That's part of the essence of a person. To be able to negate your intellect, to accept blindly, it's not simple for a human being. So that you're able to negate yourself, regardless of your intelligence quotient, what your capacity is, that itself is a phenomenal accomplishment. Hashem says, if you do that, I value as if you fulfill the Torah, the whole Torah. A person fulfills a mitzvah although he doesn't understand. Yagid hatstokas emuna. This confirms the quality of one's belief. Vaskon nefesh, and the commitment of the soul. L'kaim kol mitzvah sabori. Through thick and thin, what God wants, I'm there. Zeluchos, and this is the indicator. For that reason, since God wants to increase our reward, He wants to give us opportunity, so therefore intentionally He kept it concealed, that it should be a display of our emunah, that despite us not understanding, we still fulfill the mitzvah. I'll give you an example. The most difficult test of Avraham Avinu was the Akedah, and he understood its value. Most people say, I'm doing my best. What's truly your best? I always give an example. Your best friend falls in hard times, and he comes to you, and he needs some financial assistance. And you want to help him. And you help him generously. He says, I really need a little bit more. The person says, I've done all I could. Can't do more. I've done my best for you. I've never ever done this type of act of kindness to anybody. I've done my best. A few months later, his own son has a similar situation. When it comes to your son, you do better. But I thought you've done your best. So you see, one doesn't even realize what your best is until you're confronted with the problem. Comes to your own child, God forbid, you do better, because it's your child. But until then, I've done my best. Avraham Avinu, he's told to take his son, bring him up as a sacrifice, and he believed he was supposed to slaughter him. Satan, understanding what the value of, if he should succeed in this, he puts every block in his way. Makes it impossible for him to go. He comes as a raging river, where Avraham Avinu is drowning, and Avraham Avinu lifts his eyes to Hashem and says, Bo maim ad nofesh, I'm drowning. I want to do your will, but you don't allow me. The moment he said that, the river disappears. If it would have been us, God, I did my best, I'm going home. I'm going home. Avram didn't say I'm going home. I want to do your will. You're not allowing me. This is the first escape clause. Right? Immediately you return. Now the question is, what is that? Although you don't understand whatsoever, well, Avram did understand. Avram understood that the reason why it's so difficult to carry out the Akedah is because of the true value of the Akedah. Whatever the value is, he doesn't know what the value is. Satan is not allowing it because it has infinite value. And what does Avram want to do? He wants to do whatever has spiritual infinite value. That's what he wants to do. So Avram, having that, what is it? He doesn't know what it is. Doesn't know what it is. But evidently, if it would be lacking in value, we wouldn't have this level of complication. Oh my nefesh. I want to do your will, but they don't allow me to do your will. It's interesting. There's at the end of the Shemon Esrei, the Amidah, we supplicate Hashem after the Shemon Esrei. And we say, Elokai Nitzol Mishiro, Chol HaChoshem Olai Ro, Meher Afer Tzosem, Mekalkel Machshavtom. It's a personal prayer. But the Gemara in Baruch says there was an Amor, his name was Rabbi Alexandri. He had another supplication. He would say to God, at the end of, before he would step out of the Amidah, the Shemon Esrei, he would say, Ritzoni lasus ritzoncha. My will is to do your will. Elasor shebi isam akev. It's the yeast in the dough that doesn't allow me. I want to do your will. The yeast in the dough is referring to the Satan. Satan doesn't allow me. But what is my will? My will is not to be out of here. I want to do it. But I have a formidable opposition here. He's referred to as Satan. The Gemara quotes the pasuk, Tzadik be'emunah yichya. The tzaddik. There are many situations in life which are not understandable. So how could you be a tzaddik? The answer is because it's be'emunah yichya. The tzaddik lives be'emunoso, with his unswerving belief in God. Whatever God does, he does for the best. How could it be for the best? Don't know. But whatever God does, he does for the best. It's for my best. Could you explain it? I don't have to explain it. Don't have to explain it. God is credible. God has total credibility. I always tell over the story about Rabbi Salanter. Rabbi Salanter was very involved in combating the Enlightenment movement, which they wanted to turn Judaism into culture, Jewish culture. And he lived in Vilna, and he had influence on a certain family. And then he traveled to another part of Europe to be involved in outreach. Did Kiruv. In fact, Rabbi Salanter, he was, at the end of his life, he was in Paris, because it was a total assimilated Jewish society, to do whatever he could to influence them there. So he returns after being away for a number of years to a family that he really influenced very strongly, and he sees already many signs that there was a lot of slippage. He sent his daughter to what they called a secular high school, gymnasium, and the father prides himself to Salanter that his daughter just won an award as being one of the top violinists in that whole area, in that whole region, maybe in Lithuania. She's a 17-year-old girl. So Rabbi Salanter hears what the father says. He's priding himself in terms of his daughter's accomplishments. The father walks out, the daughter walks in, comes in, and he says to the daughter, he says, I heard you've become this expert in the violin, and you're being praised, and you won an award. Maybe you could play a piece for me on your violin. Rabbi Salanter says to her, Salanter. She says, and you can show me how good you are. So she says to Rabbi Salanter, the 18-year-old girl, says, I don't have to prove myself to you. The world knows how good I am. I don't have to prove myself to you. Disrespectful, but that wasn't it. She goes out, the father comes back in, and he shares with the father that he had asked his daughter to give him a sample of how good she is, because he wants to see, they speak, she's exceptional on the violin, and she says to me, the world knows she doesn't have to prove it to me, because she's known to be that. So this was the opening for Yisrael to lace into this man. He said, do you think God has to prove to you? So the father says, but it's true. She is that. She doesn't have to prove it to you. That's what the father sees. Actually, Rather than saying my daughter was disrespectful, he says, but it's true. She doesn't have to prove herself to you. So he says to this man, he says, that God split the sea when the Jews left Egypt, do you think God has to prove himself to you? It's a known fact, he split the sea. That God created the world, and that there's divine assistance, and there's divine providence every moment. Do you think God has to prove himself to you, that he's the creator? Who do you think you are? You're nothing. God does not prove himself to anybody. God is God. But we have questions. How do you answer the questions? You don't have to answer the questions. Tzaddik b'emunah sheyichya. It's emunah. God gives us opportunities where, despite we don't understand, you accept it. What's its value? So Chukas Torah, God vows as if you fulfilled the whole Torah. Of course, if you have that degree of trust in God, that you follow him blindly because you know whatever he does is only in our best interest, and it's the ultimate good, then you've accomplished everything. We find by Kabbalah Torah, when he offered the Torah to the nations of the world, everyone asked the question, what's written in it? Let's say God would have said something which is beneficial and they would have accepted. So on whose terms did he accept it? On their terms or on God's terms? On their own terms. But Klaus said, Nasa v'nishma. We said we accept unequivocally, even though we don't know the extent of the obligation. That was the ultimate. So what's emunah? Emunah means, despite we have questions, and the questions don't interfere with our dedication and subservience to God. That's the ultimate. Because why are we doing? We're on God's terms, not on our terms. We don't have to know. We have full trust. So Hashem specifically, intentionally, gave us the chukim that we should not understand. And the ultimate, even though we're grieved by the nations of the world. Gzeiri lufonai. It's my decree. You're not permitted to question it. You're not permitted. Because it's beyond your grasp. But of course, God can give us the capacity to understand. I want to give you that opportunity. It's interesting. Life is fraught with all kinds of questions. People say, complicated. But you know what the opportunity is? That's fraught with questions, and despite that, you accept, you're over the top. That's the ultimate level of accomplishment. If everything would be clear, it would be tzaddik v'tovlo, and Rasha v'ralo. The tzaddik, whatever he touches, he has the Midas touch. And the Rasha, whatever he touches, it's destruction. Don't you think everybody's gravitating to be the tzaddik? But God gives you a confusing situation. Tzaddik v'tovlo. And Rasha v'ralo, the evil is bad, has it bad, and the tzaddik has it good. So you know something? There's no rhyme or reason. It's total confusion. Totally confused. See, everything seems to be random. That's what it seems to be. But God decides. God is creating this complicated understanding, which means you can't put things in place. And this is a question Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem, and according to one version in the Gemara, God didn't answer him. Why is it tzaddik v'tovlo, v'ralo, and Rasha v'tovlo? According to one version. Because this is tzaddik b'emunah sheyichya. This is the ultimate opportunity. Not knowing is the ultimate. That's the ultimate situation. There's a Sefarno elsewhere who says that if you fulfill a mitzvah without understanding and knowing, it's an expression of Avos Hashem. You love God. Because to be motivated to do something, even in a difficult situation, you have to be imbued with love. So therefore, if a person fulfills a chok, a statute, and Avos Hashem is even greater than Yiras Hashem. Loving God is greater than revering, fearing God. So that's the ultimate level. So again, we're talking about opportunity. The question is, Shlomo says he was able to fathom every statute. Paradumi says, it's beyond me. Now, why wasn't he able to fathom the Paraduma? So I explained it with the Orach Chaim HaKadosh over here, which I've mentioned in years past. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh, which he asked the question, is Chukas HaTaro. This is the statute of purification. Why so Chukas HaTorah? So he explains, it's known, he cites the Rambam, that a non-Jew comes in contact with the dead. He's not contaminated. A Jew comes in contact with the dead, definitely is contaminated. The most intense level of contamination. Why is the Jew contaminated? Why is the non-Jew not contaminated? Evidently, there's something which has to the Jew, which causes him to become contaminated. The non-Jew, he's not susceptible to spiritual contamination. When the non-Jew dies, the intensity of his contamination is not the same as the intensity of a Jew's contamination. The remains of a Jew not only contaminated upon contact, if you're under the same roof with the remains, you become contaminated. You're under the same roof with the non-Jew's remains, you're not contaminated. It's a different dimension of intensity, of impurity. What makes that difference? So he explains, we know when we were told to take the Korban Pesach, this Paschal lamb in Egypt, we had to meet a number of criteria. We had to slaughter it, which was an indication of our negation and termination of a relationship with paganism, because the sheep and the goat was the worshipped species. And we had to be circumcised. If you weren't circumcised, you weren't qualified to participate in the Korban Pesach, the Paschal lamb. What about contamination? There's no mention. They had to purify themselves from contamination. Yet, the first Pesach that they had made post-Sinai, we have the story. There were people who were contaminated. They weren't able to participate in the Korban Pesach. This is how Pesach Sheni, the makeup Pesach, was introduced. A month later. Why there do you have to meet the criteria of purification? In Egypt, there was no purification. That didn't have to be addressed. So he explains the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, because in Egypt is pre-Sinai. Pre-Sinai, what was our status? We were Noahites. That's pre-Torah. Sinai is Torah. Due to receiving the Torah, we have relevance to contamination. So he goes to explain why. Why, after we receive the Torah, why do we have relevance to spiritual contamination? Contamination of the dead. And therefore, that criteria has to be addressed. And therefore, we need the red heifer, you need parah aduma to relieve yourself. Nothing else could relieve this intense purification, impurity. So, what's the reason? He says, what is it analogous to? He says, in existence, there are nether forces, which are impure forces. Every force that exists has a need to be attached to godliness, or wants to be. It has a desire to attach to godliness. The body is a receptacle of the neshama. So if a person's alive, no question. Here you have the receptacle plus the neshama, which the dimension of the Jewish soul is a different level of dimension. So when the Jew exposes itself to contamination, it attaches itself in the most intense level. Because nourishment, it's like a leech. It attaches itself and it saps. It wants to be associated with that entity of holiness, because that's godliness. The non-Jew doesn't have that. Therefore, the voters have no interest in the non-Jew. What happens after the person dies and the soul departs? What is the body? The body still has kedusha, because it was the receptacle for the neshama. You know, the halacha is, the law is that if you have a mantle, the mantle on the Sefer Torah, even though it's no longer, it's been worn out, it's been torn, you have to bury it. It's called tashmishe kedusha, because its usage was to accommodate something which is innately holy. What is the body? The body is the receptacle for something which is ultimately the ultimate level of holiness. So the body has holiness to it. Because that holiness, the nether force wants to be associated with it. And it's overwhelming. And attaches itself to such a degree that the intensity generates impurity even if you don't come in direct contact with it. That's the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. But what brought about that transition? What brought about that transition? We became the Am Hashem at Sinai. We became the Mamlechas Kohanim. We become God's people. How do we become God's people? By us receiving the Torah. So the spiritual metamorphosis that took place within us, that to Goy Kodosh, that we're able to cleave to God, which before we couldn't cleave to God to that degree. That literally we were attached. What was the catalyst? The catalyst was the Torah. That was the catalyst. Now what's Torah? So the manifestation of impurity that is rooted in the holiness of the Jew. And what is the holiness of the Jew rooted in? Our attachment to God. And what was the that's the Torah. So if the linkage and the basis for the transition and metamorphosis is something, God is infinite, the Torah is infinite. A finite being cannot comprehend something which is infinite. So therefore everything but the paraduma, this is those Chukas HaTorah. Because it's rooted in Torah. Torah is the cause of it. Of the impurity, therefore Shlomo says, it's merchokim mimeni. It's beyond me. It's beyond my grasp. For that reason. Nevertheless, the Medrash says, it's something like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God shared it with Moshe Rabbeinu. V'yikhu eilecha, to you I will reveal it. Although, as we said, the menorah, it says, te'osa es menorah. It will be made. Moshe Rabbeinu had difficulty with the menorah. So we explained what was his difficulty. Hashem says, if you have difficulty, just take the block of gold, just put it into the fire, and a menorah just evolved. Why? What was the difficulty? So we said, the menorah, which represents Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral law, that's the elucidation of Torah, of the written law, to be able to be effective, to draw those forces, which give you the divine assistance, to give you that grasp, that illumination, within a certain capacity, it had to be infused with intent. What intent does that have to be infused with? The intent of what Torah Shebaal Peh is, what the oral is. Moshe Rabbeinu is a finite being. Being limited, he doesn't have the ability to infuse it with that level of intent. Therefore God says, it shall be made. Not you will make it, it shall be made. Your participation is just putting the gold in the fire. But the actual end result, that it's a mechanism that's able to activate limited force, give you an understanding, the divine assistant, to grasp what the Torah is, that's that God has to infuse it. That's God's infusion. That's teosa. So we see there, because God encapsulated Moshe. This is, understand this detail. The background information, that background information I'm not giving you. That's infinite. So unless he gives you what we call the punchline, the bottom line, you don't know it. Shlomo had to start, had to understand the whole process. It's an impossibility because it's infinite. Yikoi lecha, to you I will reveal it. Just to end, why? According to this, why did Hashem reveal it to Moshe Rabbeinu and not to even Shlomo Melech or to anybody else? Who is Moshe? We also find by the menorah, V'yikhu eilecha shemet zay zoch kosis. The kindling of the menorah, take for you. There's a between the lighting of the menorah, the oil, which is the illumination, the basic fuel, and Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is the Amurat Torah. He is the pillar of Torah. He's Rabbeinu. He's the conduit. Being the conduit, there's a personalization to him in the menorah. That's Torah Shebaal Peh. Therefore, v'yikhu eilecha paraduma. God revealed the understanding of the paraduma. Why? It's metami asa torim and it's metaris atmeim. It's rooted in the essence of Torah. So who do you allow to be privy to that? The person whose essence is Torah. The only one's essence was Torah at this dimension. That's Moshe Rabbeinu. Therefore, he merited it, which even Shlomo Melech